Good morning, everyone. I enjoyed reading your discussion board post yesterday and your portfolio part one as well. I did those reviews. There's feedback in your rubric for both of those assignments. Neither one of those assignments lend to the use of Blackboard to actually type on documents. So those things you're going to find feedback in your rubric in Blackboard. For the discussion board, one of the themes that I consistently read when I was reading your feedback as a primary post and then to one another was how surprised you were, as well as how unaware you were of the complexity of how copyrighted materials are managed in the education world. As an educator, I was years into my practice as an educator and had no idea. I thought copyright laws were copyright laws, did not understand the Teach Act or the fair use parameters. So, the purpose in me designing this assignment was to hopefully help guide your thinking as you begin your practice. Whether you're in a hospital-based setting or an educational setting, you're accountable to the materials that you use in making sure that they've been properly protected from copyright infringements. My hope in this assignment wasn't to create anxiety and stress for you, but to heighten your awareness. One of the resources that I use very commonly is the university librarian. I teach in an undergraduate school as well as with Liberty, so I have lots of resources in the library. So when I'm not really sure if I need information and I need to figure out, is this legit to use, whose permission, I'm not an expert. I don't always know the exact right thing to do, so I'm really good about using the resources that I have. So librarians are a great resource within your university or college setting. In the hospital setting, you're going to want to know kind of where your materials come from, who's vetting them. A lot of companies, hospitals will use companies to provide their literature, and that allows the material to be copyrighted. Just use caution. Do not assume that because it's in a folder somewhere that it's okay to use, or if you find it on the internet that it is okay to use. So many of you commented that you truly felt that people did not intend to violate copyright laws, that there was no malicious intent. And I completely agree. Very often when there is a mistake, it is from lack of understanding. It's not being aware of those laws. So my hope is that this was educational for you, that it started you kind of thinking critically about where you get your materials and how you can fairly use those to really offer our students the best opportunity for information without violating copyright laws. So I appreciate your insights. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was many of you did a really good job of connecting this assignment with your Christian worldview. We are called as educators to do the right thing by our students and by our organization. That's part of our Practice Act. It's part of the NURS ethics that we're tied to. But as Christian nurse educators, we don't just have to deal with organizational confines. We have to avail ourselves to live lockstep with our Christian beliefs. And that can be challenging, especially if you don't know what you don't know. Your classmate Patricia did a beautiful job exploring this topic in the discussion board. Patricia said that our Christian walk should be highly marked with integrity and honesty. Matthew chapter 7 verse 16 tells us that we are known by our truthful words and actions. Proverbs 10 verse 9 tells us that who walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes dishonest paths will eventually be caught. And Proverbs 11, verse 3 advises us that the integrity of the upright guides them, but whoever is unfaithful will be destroyed by their dishonesty. As we get closer to becoming novice educators, we should be mindful of the standards, laws, and regulations directing our teaching in order to legally educate our students and have a successful and honest career. I think Patricia did a beautiful job giving it in a very succinct, concise manner, reminding us, okay, the Bible's really serious about this, but so is the world. You know, it is so rare when these days that the world and our worldly perspective align with our Christian worldview. So it's really nice that our profession is reminding us to act with integrity, and that as Christians, that should come second nature to us. So I appreciate Patricia's insight with that, and so many of you did such a great job on this. Grading discussion boards for folks that are in 620 is like the best job, because you guys know what to do. You know how it works. You know the logistics. You know what to cite. All I get to do is read how fabulous you are. So really appreciate that. Your portfolios were fantastic. You all managed to submit them correctly and they looked great. Several of you got brave and embedded some pictures. It was really good for me to see your own personality come through in this assignment. My prayer is that you don't use this assignment as an academic exercise. Whether you choose to use the portfolio that's in Blackboard for 6 months after your graduation, because you will have access, or whether you just want to play with it here and then design your own portfolio on the World Wide Web. There's lots of platforms that allow you to develop electronic portfolios. It's where we're going. So my hope is that this isn't a check the box exercise, that you really understand that more and more organizations are requesting and aligning with electronic portfolios. And the more personalized and professional you can practice with this one, the more success you're going to have in the next steps. My reminder to you is that this is a 3-part exercise, just like your integrative literature review. When I go to grade part 2, I'm going to go back in and start at the beginning. I'm going to look through part 1 and then look into part 2 kind of progressively. My encouragement is that you do the same thing when you get ready to start on part 2, that you begin at the beginning of your portfolio. You go in and look at the feedback that I have given you. You tweak and make updates as appropriate, and then you begin part 2. So that as you move through this exercise, at the end of part 3, you have a pretty polished, kind of ready to go package deal ready. Your grades on the portfolio tend to be highly successful, primarily because they're really subjective. Is the stuff there, and does it look like you made the effort? Is it aesthetic? Kind of the logistics. But what you choose to put on your resume and how you choose to format it, all that kind of stuff is up to you. You've just got to follow the directions and make it look pretty. If you've got a very high grade, and many of you did, that doesn't mean that you haven't been given constructive feedback. If you had points deducted, those were things that you really need to fix. You may have gotten a very high grade and go in and say, oh my gosh, what is Dr. Hudgens doing? There's all this comment. All of it's just feedback. I've looked at your resume and have you thought about this? I've looked at your philosophy. Maybe you should move your paragraphs around to make it stronger in this way. All of those are recommendations. So go back in and just make sure that even if you were highly successful, there's still stuff for you to read and stuff for you to decide whether or not you want to apply to polish your resume or improve your portfolio. So that's this week. Let's shift and talk about your integrative literature review. This week, you're going to be doing part 1 of your integrative literature review. Part 1 is the design of the blueprint of what you will be researching in part 2. So part 1 is the blueprint. Part 2 is the nuts and bolts of in the literature, you're pulling articles and you're reviewing them. And part 3 is the synthesis of that material that you found and applying it to answering your question and explaining how this matters. So blueprint, nuts and bolts, application. Okay, so the blueprint is, think about your plan of care for your patient. This is what I'm going to do and this is what I expect. These are the steps I'm going to follow. If you don't have a good plan, everything else is going to be a hot mess. So start with a good plan. I want to remind you that your PICO question has to be about the role of the nurse educator in whatever problem area, whatever population, whatever section of content you want to research, but the content needs to be focused on the role of the nurse educator. So be aware of that. The other thing to be aware of is you're going to be using the Prisma format for following the research plan. This is a standardized tool that's used nationally and internationally to guide researchers. There are things that are omitted, so read it carefully. If there are big red letters that say omit, skip the step. It's because it's too deep of a dive for what you're doing. The other thing to remember, one of the steps in here in your Prisma format, it does tell you to write your PICO, but it does a PICOS. So there's an S, and that's about study design. Your study design is an integrative literature review, so that's not a step you need to do. If you want to throw it on there, that's fine, but for your purposes, your work is an integrative literature review. So I'm going to send you a short little video, I think it's about 2 minutes, to remind you the PICO steps and exactly what you're looking for. That'll be with this video in the email. And then I want you to begin to look at your topic. It is important to look for something that you're interested in, something that you're passionate about, and something that is related to your next steps as a career. Wherever you're going to practice, if you're going to be practicing as an educator in a neonatal intensive care, look at the role of a nurse educator in something to do with preemies. If you're going to be in an academic setting teaching undergraduates, look at something about the role of the educator in an undergrad setting. Make this valuable to you. Again, at this point, I really want you to not be looking at assignments as to be academic or to be survived, but something to grow you and develop you. So be intentional about your PICO process. I think those are all of my notes. If you have questions or concerns, I'm traveling to the NLN National Conference in San Diego. I think I leave at 5 on Thursday morning. So my replies may be a little bit more disjointed than normal. That does not mean that I'm not available. Just know that if there's a delay, it's because I'm on West Coast time. As long as California has not broken off and fallen into the Pacific or a typhoon come or any other weird thing these days, I'm looking forward to San Diego. It's absolutely beautiful out there. So know that if there's a little bit of a delay over Thursday through Sunday, it is not that I don't want to meet your needs. It's just that I'm in a conference and there may be a little bit of a lag time, so please be patient with me. If you have questions or concerns about any feedback that you've received this week, email me. General questions, who, what, when, where, how, put those on the Ask the Professor link. Folks, know that I'm praying for you. I know that you are tired and you are weary and you are ready to be graduated. You are almost there, so hang in there. Let me know how I can support you and serve you, and be in touch. Take care.